Hello, I'm Helena and I'm the director of these Quicker Elements, and I'm here today with George, who's our lovely writer. We're going to be having a chat to give you a look behind the scenes at the play and production before the show next Friday. Don't forget to keep getting your free tickets, which I'm sure are linked somewhere on this post, but that is the job of the marketing director and not either of us. So first of all, I thought we could kind of start with talking about your influences in writing the play, George, because given it's such a referential text, there must be quite a few of them.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of small ones, and there's the ones etched in the mirror, and there's other ones kind of woven into the fabric of what she's saying. But there's also two probably bigger ones, which are this book by Umberto Eco, the Italian writer who also wrote The Name of the Rose. It's called The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana, and that's about a bookseller who is in a car accident and loses all of his memories, and he has to go. He can only remember by reading texts that he associates memories with. And so he goes back to his childhood home and has to reconstruct his life. And then that ended up getting crossed over with Samuel Beckett's play, Krapp's Last Tape, in which she's able to kind of replay, he's able to think about himself as someone who existed almost as a character in his own past. And so those two got merged together, along with all of the monologues we've been seeing loads of in the past few months, like Alan Bennett's Talking Heads, Seawall, Simon Stevens, Fleabag, for example. That's not a monologue in itself per se, but the way that they deal with the camera and that. So yeah. Well, speaking of Fleabag, I know we talked quite a lot about that when we were getting started, because the beginning of the play opens with a particular kind of parody of or kind of citation of Fleabag. So did that continue through the rest of the way you were directing, Lana?
Yeah, Fleabag was one of our sort of biggest influences in the play. So the play concerns Lana, who's this character who comes in and she seems really blasé and sort of sarcastic and almost quite full of herself, much in the same way that sort of Fleabag is introduced by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. But like in Fleabag, we wanted to play with these kind of cracks in that facade and really sort of delve into the vulnerability of the character. And that's something that Waller-Bridge does really very well. The play also is addressed to a mirror, which is the camera. And so Fleabag and other monologues informed the way in which we played with the mirror. Something that we discussed a lot in the rehearsal room with Marianne, the actor, is when is the invisible audience present and when is it not? There's no sort of direct fourth wall breaking in these quicker elements, but there is at points this suggestion of the audience beyond the mirror. And then, yes, at times we seem to be living entirely in the character's head, and we're simply observers who she isn't aware of. And I think that it's an interesting medium to play with when thinking about the audience and thinking about framing a character, particularly when it's a recorded play. So there is this intermediary of the camera, and that's probably interesting that we thought about references in terms of sort of physicalizing the play, so things like framing, whereas you sort of think about references as these things that are cited. And I think that's something that's important to the script as well, because it's really quite meta-theatrical. There's all these sort of layers and references, and Lana's kind of grasping to understand herself and her identity and her past by the quotes on her mirror. I think that's quite relevant to us as theatre goers who also try to kind of grasp for a sense of meaning encapsulated by what we're seeing on stage, especially when our own identities are threatened. So I was wondering why you decided to go for this constant sort of citation style when you were writing the text.
Yeah, I mean, as theatre goers, I think the stage only makes sense in relation to all the other things we've seen on it. Likewise with the text, and Lana is only able to make sense of herself in relation to all of the things that she's presumably read and written down, although she doesn't actually know whether her to have put them in the mirror. Which is a weird point of ambiguity for her, and like the cause of quite a lot of personal difficulty. I think with citation, it's one way of literary text making itself feel real. It grounds itself in the tradition, in a prehistory of other works, and but again, it always knows too that the play is made up. So to it, the other players aren't made up, but the play itself, or Lana, kind of knows that she might be made up, and that's what the play hopefully gets at. That's what it dramatizes. It gives that the idea of who are you in relation to all these other texts. You're no more than them, but you're no less. It's a strange kind of almost power dynamic with all these other things that have gone before. Lana really needs an answer. There's something that these texts aren't telling her. And I hope that that drama transfers itself into the life of a spectator. So you then take it away, and that's a text for you to think back on. And are you now going to think, when you look in the mirror, what if someone's watching me? I suppose that's really what's going on, I hope.
There's almost something a little bit Black Mirror-y about it in a way, which is another thing we slightly discussed. It doesn't really touch on technology so much as it does simply on identity. But I suppose in terms of a short form piece, that's possibly another sort of influence behind it.
Yeah, I mean, when it's all over and we turn the laptop off or whatever we're watching it off, there's a black mirror looking back, and then your own Lana then, and there have been words written in the screen which you've been reading. Especially if we did subtitles, then we'd be getting a whole extra layer of meta. But that's true. You mentioned how I'm thinking about it always in terms of writing, in terms of reading and things. But I think the thing that I've noticed you and Marianne doing so well is making it real, making it human. And I know there's some humanity in the writing anyway, but if there's anything I could stand to learn, it's putting that even further up the list of priorities, I suppose. But what's that been like, and has it been easy, or has it been interesting in some way to figure out just how much I need to be ignored, you and Marianne together as a team, and Rosie as well, the assistant?
I wouldn't say you need to be ignored, but I'd say there are definitely difficulties of translating something which is such a literary artifact onto the kind of stage screen that we've got. I suppose that comes down to the quotes in a way. As George is aware, there were times when we've had to work with the script and sort of like bluntly tell you this doesn't work. But I think in a way that's one of the joys of working with a writer, is that you really get all these multiple collaborative perspectives on something, and you're bringing it in one direction, and then I might take it in another direction, and then sometimes Marianne will say something and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't think of that at all. The sort of her inhabiting the character will take it in a third way. But yeah, I agree. So it's a different perspective. And then Rosie, who's our assistant director, comes from a film perspective. So we've got a sort of literary perspective, a theatre perspective, and a film perspective, and then the actor's perspective on the text, which has been really exciting to work with in such a collaborative sense. What you've talked about a little bit is the sort of the meta layers of it, the sort of the importance of textuality and the importance of understanding a character as someone created by words. And we very much hope we've captured that in the production, although obviously that's going to be yours and the audience's judgment as to whether we have. But we've also wanted to play up the human side of
the audience, but now, yeah.
We've also wanted to play up the human side, and that's something we've done by trying to amplify the character's vulnerability. We've kind of taken it in a direction where we could have made her a colder character or a darker character. And Marianne, Rosie and I have really wanted to make her very human and very vulnerable. And I think that's something that in the process of filming the text has become more important than it could have been. So yeah, you can take it in different directions, but I ultimately think that's sort of part of the exhilarating thing about working with a text like this, which is so like full of depth and meaning.
But the central conceit is all about that mirror. It's not, I mean, first and foremost for me, it is the words. But in terms of how an audience approaches it, the thing really is about Marianne, Lana's relationship with the camera, i.e. the mirror, and therefore the spectator. Was that that visual component and the kind of interactive component a really big force in how you were approaching on that weekend where we were filming it?
I must admit, first of all, I was a little bit nervous about filming it because I've done kind of recorded, I've done Zoom theatre before. My last play was written specifically for Zoom, but sort of coming from a theatre background, having this film setup, we had lights, we had the camera, we had reflectors, the frame of the camera, and this backstage space that was really invisible, whereas on a stage it is much more visible. I found that quite concerning and quite constricting at first, but I actually increasingly came to find it quite liberating, and to be able to make sort of substantial use of that physical space, even though it's just a blank backdrop, that this physical space can also be something conceptual, and that we can make the most of the active presence. So something we've played with a lot is sort of perspective and angles. We wanted Lana to come close enough to the lens for it to be sort of really discomforting and really sort of have her look directly into the audience's eyes and have them sort of feel like she's watching them just like we're watching her, and then again draw away far enough that we almost lose her. But yet we always wanted to have her oriented towards this eye of the camera, which, as you say, that the camera mirror is the ultimate central conceit. I also think there's something interesting. Of course, it's unfortunately a coronavirus era play, and there's this sense of constriction and inevitability which courses through it. And I think having the square of the frame is highly relevant to that.
Yeah, thank God for Rosie. Couldn't have done it without her.
Yeah, Rosie is our assistant director, and she comes from a film perspective. And let me tell you, I would not have been able to have anything to do with this play without Rosie being this sort of amazing film guru, and brilliant directorial point of view as well, assisting us.
But the funny thing is that it wasn't always going to be like that with the mirror, with the direct interaction with it. I feel like that may now be the strongest element of the play for people who come to it at this point.
Oh, I definitely agree. Can I ask how you initially thought the mirror was going to work? How you thought the film would work?
Well, she was going to be, I suppose the camera was just going to be a sort of fly on the wall originally. So it was still going to have this kind of, I think of it as a kind of a hyper-naturalistic thing where she is completely being herself and not really acknowledging, but that just doesn't work dramatically. You do have to take account of the spectators somehow, I feel. Yeah, that seems like the first kind of principle. Originally, she was going to literally have scraps of paper with things written on them, and then they would be in the middle of the room, and she would be circling around this sort of little pile of scraps, picking them up kind of at random. It wouldn't really be at random. It would be very hard to learn the lines for. But then she would burn them periodically at the end, and so there would be a kind of declining structure to the play. But the real leap, the conceptual leap, came. I read the John Donne poem, "A Valediction of My Name on the Window." I think it's that, where he inscribes his name on the window and is writing a poem about how you can see through the window, and then you can also see a reflection of yourself, and the name that he writes is kind of in between the two. And that was kind of the big penny dropping moment, where I realized that this would be the best way to take account of the medium itself, and then to have a real relationship with an audience and make it all mean something a bit more. So yeah, I guess if we're nearing the end of our time, is that right? I think I definitely wanted to ask you about how it's been, the whole process, directing, as you are a female team, for a play about a female character featuring domestic abuse. And definitely when I was writing it, I wanted to approach it in a way that I felt was authentic to my awareness of domestic abuse, which is so different to what the female perspective would be. And there was always a certain distance with what I was doing. I was citing things, I was looking things up, I was doing research. She was speaking through other people's words as well as mine, and so on. And I wondered if you had a sort of different, more close relationship with, or whether you thought that the background of the people on the team helped with an understanding of Lana, and whether the play might have been set up to disregard what the author actually made.
I think that's really interesting, and I think you're right. It is something that's really important, and it has been really important to me. So for context, we had on set myself, Rosie, Rhea, our sound director, and then Marianne, the actor. So we were very much a female team in the rehearsal room and on set, and we've had a welfare officer as well. So we've had this welfare focus. But I think coming from a female perspective, particularly interpreting a male written text, and I know we've talked a little bit in production about sort of the male gaze and how we can mitigate that. It comes down to sort of our view of the character and how we can pay due respect to the text while also ensuring the authenticity of the experience is captured. So I did some research at the start about dissociative amnesia, which is where you go through trauma and you black out memories, and how common that is in abusive relationships. And of course, things like gaslighting, which have been talked about quite a lot in the news recently, and various cases of women escaping domestic abuse relationships in various ways. But yeah, I agree. It's the kind of gender and power dynamics are something that we have very much read, been sure to read the text in light of those. So there would be times where there were lines that we would read, and so there's a line partway through the play, I saw him die lots of times after that. And we thought about the different ways in which the vulnerability, the manipulation through which the character goes, how that would inform her delivery of that line, the different layers that exist behind it, and the sort of historical structures that exist behind it, as well as simply what that character might be feeling in the moment. I think it's been about adding another layer of depth there, even beyond sort of the actual textual depth of it. And I would like to think, and I hope we've handled the issues sensitively and well, and been true to the experiences both of the character and of people in the real world who go through those traumatic experiences. But of course, Marianne, who's the actor, has been brilliant in every way. She is absolutely wonderful, and it's been amazing working with someone who has such a kind of innate and intimate understanding of how to bring a character and all their sort of layers and flaws and complexities to life. And I'm so excited for people to watch her bring our Lana onto the stage / screen.
Yeah, she seems to have an unbelievable knack of telling me when something just doesn't sound like something a person would say, and I agree. I can't ever argue with her.
Yeah, she has brought another perspective to the text, which has been so mature and experienced and just really exciting to work with.
Indeed.
Cool. So I think we'll wrap up this discussion here. I hope that's been interesting for everyone, and I hope it's convinced you to buy your tickets. They are free if you haven't already. So from me and from George, thank you for tuning in, and can't wait for you to all see the show and let us know what you think.